And we're going to continue with the sixth chapter of Oversea Under Stone by Susan Cooper. Great Uncle Mary has taken the kids up on a walk. They've decided to tell him about the map and that they think that the break-in had to do with that. Uncle Mary seems to know all about the map, where it dates from. It's a 600-year-old copy of a much older manuscript. He's going to read it to them. If you are a fan of The Dark is Rising, you have probably already guessed who Great Uncle Mary is. Definitely a character in that book. But let's pick up with his reading of the map. He peered at the manuscript again. Then, stumblingly and with many pauses, while he held it to the sunlight or fumbled in his mind for a word, he began to read in his deep, far-away voice. The children sat and listened, with the sun hot on their faces, and the wind still whispering in their ears. This I write, that when the time comes, I shall be found by the proper man, and I leave it in the care of the old land, that soon shall be no more. Into the land of Cornwall, the kingdom of Mark, there came in the days of my fathers a strange knight, fleeing toward the west. Many fled hither in those days when the old kingdom was broken by the invader, and the last battle of Arthur was lost. For only in the western land did men still love God and the old ways. And the strange knight who came to the place of my fathers was called Bedwin, and he bore with him the last trust of Logris, the Grail made in the fashion of the Holy Grail, that told upon its side the true story of Arthur, soon to be misted by men in men's minds. Each panel told of an evil overcome by Arthur, and the company of God, until the end when evil overcame all, and the last panel showed the promise and the proof of Arthur's coming again. But behold, said the knight Bedwin to my fathers, evil is upon us now, and so shall it be for time beyond our dreaming. Yet if the Grail, that is the last trust of the old world, be not lost, then when the day is ripe, the Pendragon shall come again, and at the last all shall be safe, and evil be thrust out, never to return. And so that trust be kept, he said, I give it into your charge, and your sons' sons, until the day come. For I am wounded near death from the last of the old battles, and I can do no more. And very soon he died, and they buried him over the sea and under the stone, and there he lies until the day of our Lord. And so the Grail passed to my father's charge, and they guarded it in the land of Cornwall, where men still strove to keep alive the old ways, while in the east the men of evil grew more numerous, and the land of Logris grew dark, for Arthur was gone, and Mark was dead, and the new kings were not as the old had been. And with each turn of years the Grail came to the charge of the eldest son, and at the last it came to me. And since the death of my father I have kept it safe as best I might, in secret and in true faith. But now I grow old and am childless, and the greatest darkness of all comes upon our land. For the heathen men of evil, who came to the east in years past, and slew the Englishmen and took their land, are turning westward now, and we shall not long be safe from them. The darkness draws toward Cornwall, and the long ships creep to our shore, and the battle is near which must lead to final defeat, and the end of all that we have known. No guardian for the Grail is left, since my brother's son, whom I loved as my own, is turned already to the heathen men, and guides them to the west. And to save my life and the secret of the Grail, that only its guardian knows, I must flee, even as Bedwin the strange knight fled. But in all the land of Logris no haven remains, so I must cross the sea to the land where they say Cornishmen have fled whenever terror comes. But the Grail may not leave this land, but must wait the Pendragon till the day comes. So therefore I trusted to this land, over sea and under stone, and I mark here the signs by which the proper man in the proper place may know where it lies, the signs that wax and wane but do not die. The secret of its charge I may not write, but carry unspoken to my grave. Yet the man who finds the Grail and has other words from me will know by both the secret for himself, and for him is the charge, the promise and the proof. And in his day the Pendragon shall come again, and that day shall see a new Logres, with evil cast out, where the old world shall appear no more than a dream. Great Uncle Mary stopped reading, but the children sat as still and speechless as if his voice still rang out. The story seemed to fit so perfectly into the green land rolling below them that it was as if they sat in the middle of the past. They could almost see the strange knight Bedouin riding toward them over the brow of a slope, and the long ships of the invaders lurking beyond the grey granite headland and its white fringe of surf. Simon said at last, "Who is the Pendragon?" "King Arthur," Barney said. Jane said nothing, but sat thinking of how sad Cornishmen sailing away over the sea, how the sad Cornishman sailing away over the sea from his threatened land. She looked at Great Uncle Mary. He was gazing unseeingly down the sea and the headland beyond Trewisic. The taut lines of his face relaxed and wistful. "When the old world," he repeated softly to himself, "shall appear no more than a dream." Simon scrambled to his feet and went to crouch close to him, peering at the manuscript on his knee. "Then the map must show where the Grail is. I say, suppose we find it. What will it mean?" "It will mean all kinds of things," Great Uncle Mary said grimly. "And not all of them pleasant, perhaps." "What will it look like? What's a Grail, anyway?" "A kind of drinking vessel, a chalice, a cup, but not an ordinary cup." Great Uncle Mary looked at them gravely. "Now listen to me. This map you have found shows the way to a sign which men have been seeking for centuries. I said that I had been looking for it, but do you remember I said that there were others too, the enemy side, if you like. These people are evil, and they can be very, very dangerous indeed." Great Uncle Mary spoke with great seriousness, leaning forward, and the children gazed rather nervously back. "They have been very close to me for a long time now," he said. "And here in Trewisic they have been close to you too. One of them is the man Norman Withers. Another is the woman who calls herself his sister. There may be others, but I do not know." "Then the burglary?" They stared at him, and Jane said, "Was it them?" "Undoubtedly," Great Uncle Mary said. "Not in person, perhaps, but they must have been behind it all, the ransacked books, the stolen maps, the attempt to look for a secret hiding place under the floor. They were very near, you know, nearer than I. When I rented the grey house, it was no more than a shot in the dark. I had narrowed the search down to the Trewisic area, but that was all. And I had no idea what I was looking for. It might have been anything. But they knew. Somehow, in some dark way, they found out about the manuscript, and they came after it last night. Only they hadn't bargained for your finding it by chance first." He smiled slightly. "I should like to see Withers' face today." "Everything fits now," Simon said slowly. "The way he made friends so quickly with Father, the way he took us out in the boat." For an unpleasant moment he heard Great Uncle Mary's voice saying again emphatically, "They can be very dangerous indeed." Barney said, "But, Gummery, did you know that we should find whatever it was? Us, I mean, me and Simon and Jane." His great uncle looked at him sharply. "What makes you say that?" "Well, I don't know." Barney fumbled for words. "You must have looked yourself before we came and not found anything. And when we did come, you were never there. You kept on disappearing, almost as if you were leaving the house to us." Great Uncle Mary smiled. "Yes, Barney," he said, "I did have an idea you might find it, because I know you three very well. That was one idea I had before our friends did. so that for all their interest in the grey house, they were still worried about what I was up to, and I led them a high old dance all over South Cornwall while you were at home. I was, you might say, a red herring."
"But what?" Barney said. "Oh, never mind," Simon broke in, hovering restlessly at Great Uncle Mary's elbow. "It's all obvious now. The thing is, what about the map?"
"You're quite right." Great Uncle Mary sat down on the rock again. "We haven't any time to lose."
"It's a map of Trewesick," Simon said eagerly. "Jane found that out, only the coast seems to have changed." "I was comparing it with the map in a guidebook at the Grey House," Jane said. It hardly seemed worth mentioning her visit to the vicar. "The funny thing is that though the outlines of the coast don't look alike, the names are the same. If you look very closely on the manuscript, one of the headlands is called King Mark's Head, only it's spelled all wrong. And that's the name the guidebook uses for Camar Head. So the manuscript must show Trewesick."
"That's right," Great Uncle Mary said, bent over his parchment. "Simple corruption, dropping consonants." His head shot up. "What did you say?" Jane looked puzzled. "Did you say it was called King Mark's Head in a guidebook?"
"Yes, that's right. Does it matter?"
"Oh, no." The usual remote expression came back over Great Uncle Mary's face like a veil. Only that particular name hadn't been used. "Oh, only that particular name hasn't been used for a very long time, and most people have forgotten about it. I should like to have a look at that guidebook of yours."
"I don't understand this." Simon was peering over the old map. "Even if it is Trewesick, where does that get you? It's the most useless treasure map I ever saw. There are all sorts of peculiar marks on it, but none of them means anything. Nothing leads to anything else. So how can it show you where the Grail is?" Great Uncle Mary pointed to the manuscript.
"Remember what the text says. For the proper man in the proper place to find."
"Perhaps it's like one of those mazes you see in books sometimes," Jane said, thinking hard. "The ones that are simple once you get going, but it's awfully hard to find where to start. That could be what he meant by the proper place. If you took the map to the right starting point, then it would tell you where to go from there," Simon almost wailed. "But how do we find out where to start from?" Barney, standing at the Great Uncle Mary's elbow, had not been listening. He had lapsed into one of his dreaming silences, gazing wide-eyed out over the harbor and occasionally glancing back at the map. "I know what it reminds me of," he said musingly. No one took any notice. Barney went on dreamily to himself. "It's like one of Mother's drawings, the ones she calls perspective sketches. It looks like a picture, not a map at all, really. You've got that bump of this hill coming over the edge of the harbor when you look down, and the headland curving like that." He traced his finger through the air over the view before him. "And those stones on top of it make the funny little knobs on the side of the map." "Golly, he's got it!" Simon shouted, jerking Barney out of his reverie. "That's what it is! Look! It is a picture and not a map, and that's why the shape looked all wrong compared with the guidebook. Look, you can see." He turned the manuscript carefully from Great Uncle Mary's hands and held it in front of them against the long rocky arm of Camar Head. And as they looked at the headland, back to the manuscript, the scrawled brown lines suddenly seemed so obviously a picture of the scene before them that they wondered how they could possibly have thought it was a map. "Well then," Jane said incredulously. Jane said, incredulity spreading over her face as she looked from one to the other. "This must be the proper place, the beginning of the maze. All this time, without knowing it, we've been standing at the very same spot as the man who drew the picture. Just think!" She looked at the manuscript in awe, and there we will pause.